This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello, welcome to Undistracted. I'm your host, Laura Bennett, and this is the podcast where we learn from our guests how to be better at building our lives with intention around our passions, our purpose, and deal with some of the stuff that gets in the way of that. You can rate, review this podcast wherever you listen, subscribe as well, and find video versions of many of these chats on the Hope 1032 YouTube channel. Our guest today is Jessica Seaborn, a Sydney-based author and former journalist. Her new book, Isn't It Nice We Both Hate the Same Things, explores the challenges and rewards of adult friendships, why making friends later in life can be harder, but also deeply necessary, centering on the story of her main character, Charlie. Can you describe Charlie for us?
Yeah, Charlie, she's just left her husband. She's just ended her marriage. They've been together for 10 years. And she has a best friend whose life is perhaps going in a different direction to hers. You know, she's just ended a marriage. Her best friend is trying to get pregnant and is very much in a very loving marriage. And so she really feels like she's not surrounded by the right people anymore. She obviously still loves her best friend, but in her separation with her husband, they have seemingly overnight chosen him, and she's finding herself incredibly lonely.
When you start to be in a position like that, where your friends are in a different life stage, different experience to you, how do you think that does start to affect friendship dynamics?
Yeah, I think it can affect it pretty easily and perhaps pretty quickly. But I think it depends on how solid your friendship is, because I think you just know that not everybody is on the same path as you, and that's so fine. Sometimes you just drift apart, but also I think friendships can morph in a way that maybe you don't speak to each other as often anymore, but when you do, it's exactly like it was before, and that's okay too. I think friendship can mean many, many different things at many different stages of life, and you can maybe be apart and then be together, and that's okay too. So I think it's about accepting that not everything needs to look a certain way.
And surely it can't look the same way as it did when you first became friends anyway, or, life wouldn't be changing, you wouldn't be growing.
Yeah, I don't think you're always the same person. So when you meet someone and then, 10, 20 years later, however long it's been, you just are a different person. And so your friendship changes, and sometimes it changes for the better, or sometimes you just grow apart. And I think anyone can relate to their friendships changing and maybe needing some new people in later in life.
And there is a kind of grief to this experience of friendships shifting, friendships changing, even losing friendships. Why did you want to approach that particular theme in your new book?
That was actually the starting point of the book. I knew I wanted to explore adult friendship, specifically making new friends as an adult. That is the crux of the second book, and I had that to start with, which is a bit maybe unorthodox. They always kind of tell you for writers, like, don't start with theme, don't try and write around a theme. And I definitely started with a theme, and that's probably why it took so long to get the plot right. I just related to it. I'm in my 30s. I moved to Sydney when I was 21. I knew two people who left soon after. I really had no one in Sydney. And it took a really long time to make any kind of friends. And then COVID hit and we retreated into our homes. And I think I almost forgot what it was like to meet new people and meet colleagues and be around colleagues. And so I came out of COVID in my 30s, and I was just like, I have a very small pool of quality people. And that's great. And for a lot of people, that's fine. And for me, that's fine too. But I did kind of go on a bit of a journey to make new friends and meet new people. And I've started to, in the last couple of years, really make more of an effort with the people who are already in my life. So maybe I am the one that's kind of instigating catch-ups, or let's go to dinner, or let's see each other again, let's get a movie. And I don't think I was that proactive in my 20s. So I'm definitely been doing that a lot more in my 30s. I just felt passionate about exploring it in the book. I think it's a really fascinating topic. And I think people can relate to it.
Absolutely. And I think too, that feeling of not knowing necessarily what to do, like, why is that such a common thing that we don't, like, I feel like as humans, given we long for connection, you think we'd be better at ways to actually find it. But why do we seem to struggle so much?
I don't know. I think COVID didn't help. I think maybe we got used to spending time by ourselves, maybe social anxiety. But I do think I think you have to be vulnerable. I think you have to be vulnerable to reach out to someone that maybe you don't know that well, and suggest a coffee or a dinner. Knowing that maybe they don't want that. Maybe it'll fizzle out. Maybe it won't go anywhere. I feel like adult friendships is a little bit like dating in a way. Particularly when you're trying to make new friends or meet new people, it does feel a little bit like dating. You're putting yourself out there, you're being vulnerable. So it is hard. I think as kids, kids are so courageous and brave, and they don't maybe have that same level of insecurity that adults can sometimes have. And so when we get older, we feel almost a little bit embarrassed at being like, hey, maybe I need some new friends.
Mm.
Once you realize that you do, it's so much easier just to reach out to people and connect.
What were some of the things that you tried to make those new friendships?
When I first moved to Sydney, I tried things. So I always, when I first moved to Sydney, I said, I'm going to say yes to any social invitation. So, sporting groups, kind of out for drinks with people, colleagues, invites, anything to do with work, after work drinks, going to football games, just anything. And that kind of worked. I met friends of friends. I wouldn't say I met anyone that was apart from colleagues, I didn't really meet anyone that was kind of a long-standing friend. But then recently, after COVID and I came out, I joined run clubs. I was never really a runner. Gyms shut down. I was trying to write and work full time, and so I wasn't really exercising. And so I bought a treadmill, and so I kind of built up running and then joined run clubs. I've done Bumble for Friends, the app. I've
Mm.
tried that. I found that really strange. I didn't use that for very long. That felt like dating for sure. In sport clubs, that was tricky because the sports that I love are more individual sports, swimming, tennis. They're just not really, I wouldn't say they're group sports. So yeah, I've tried a
Yeah.
few things there, but I honestly, friends I've made have really been through work. That's like the easiest thing as you are spending all that time with someone. So yeah, that's kind of been it, to be honest.
Yeah, it can make work feel like a maybe, all of life experience though. But if you work with great people, then maybe why not? We don't have to kind of shut off at 5 p.m.
Yeah, and you're after work drinks or just you're similar in your jobs and you're going through the same thing. And I think yeah, you can bond over that. The only thing that's maybe a bit hard about Sydney is it's a bit transient. So I've made a lot of friends over the years that don't live in Sydney anymore. Doesn't mean we're not friends anymore. We still talk. We don't necessarily see each other a lot.
How do you go being the person who, makes the first move or is the one to remind everybody that, like, hey, I exist, let's go do a movie? Like, does that not feel a little bit exhausting sometimes to have to always be the one to sort of step up first, I suppose?
Yeah, I will give it a bit of time. If it really does feel like I'm the only person, I will start to phase that friendship out. I am pretty good at phasing a friendship out if it's not serving me. I also like to ask myself, would that person really be there for me if I needed them? Like if I really wanted to call someone and needed some help or needed to talk to someone, would they be there for me? And if the answer's a flat no, and I don't think that's ever going to change, I also don't think those friendships serve as well. So I absolutely have no issues making the effort and instigating, but if it is always one-sided, that friendship may not last very long.
Mm. And maybe that's the benefit of friendship. In your 30s, going into your 40s, you do probably have a little bit more confidence to say, this is what I like, this is what I don't, this isn't working for me. We've kind of got the maturity to handle that better.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, I certainly in my 20s, I don't know if I really knew who I was. I don't know if I knew what I wanted, what kind of career I wanted, what kind of person I wanted to be, and I've gotten a lot more sure of that. And I'm almost unapologetic in a way of what I want. I like to think of happiness as like a pie chart, and the slices are just different things, and the pie chart changes all the time. So making sure that I know that there's not one aspect of my life that is responsible for my happiness, because I think that's unfair. Like I don't think my partner should be responsible for 100% of my happiness. They obviously
Mm.
make me incredibly happy, but so should my work or my writing or reading books or my independence makes me happy. So I think it's about being aware of what makes you happy. And for me, great friendships, they don't have to be quantity, but they do have to be quality. That can make me happy too. So I think I just realized that as I got older and I knew what was going to make me happy, and then I just went after it.
Mm. Well, let's take it back to Charlie for a second. You mentioned that she is obviously starting over. There's a lot of shifts in that. What do you think she teaches us about that starting over kind of experience?
I think it's really brave, but it's also really scary. When I was researching friendship, when I knew I wanted to write about friendship and making new friends, I did a lot of research. And two of the reasons that people feel the need to try and make new friends is one, the end of a long-term relationship, and you lose a lot of friends that way. And two is when you move to a new city or country or town. And so I put both of those in Charlie. She's not from where she lives, and she has just ended a marriage. And it's really scary. And I think sometimes people feel that maybe they don't deserve happiness after uprooting their life like that, when it was particularly her decision to leave. But I think also there are people around you who are unhappy. And so I think if you let others in, you'll realize just how many other people maybe are lonely or other people might be suffering. And so maybe they just need to see you go through it to kind of build up that courage. So I think it's a pretty incredible thing just to go after what you want.
Is that the thing in terms of, us not liking the same things and what we kind of touch on in the title there? Is it about the fact that, there is kind of this relatability when you go, oh, you don't like that? Neither do I. And for Charlie even to realize, oh, you're also lonely, so am I. Like, do we connect through those common sort of hardships, I suppose, more so than maybe the positive things?
Yeah, I think you can bond with someone over something you dislike. I just think it's more fun too, particularly colleagues. I think that's how you bond with colleagues, things that frustrate you, things that annoy you. I think when I was researching for the book, I was kind of trawling the depths of Twitter and to see what people said about adult friendship, to just kind of work out how I wanted to structure the story. And someone had written a tweet that said, being friends with someone is just hating the same things. And so that's where the title came from. And I realized how true it is. And I just have this really distinct memory of a colleague from a previous job. And I was quite new. And this colleague, we hadn't really bonded yet. We're now very close friends, but we hadn't bonded yet. And there was something in the company that was really frustrating me. And we were lining up for a coffee and I kind of just like snuck in and I was like, oh, so that meeting we had. And then she looked at me, she was like, yes. And then we just kind of we were like on the same level that we both hated that particular thing. And then we were friends after that. It really, I have this distinct memory of it. And I feel like that, to me, things like that is what the title embodies.
It is kind of funny because I feel like if you're not safe to whinge with somebody for even the most ridiculous
Yes.
things, you're not going to be friends. Like, you don't want to be judged for your whinges.
Yes, it is. You got to balance it a little bit. But when you kind of crack that person and you've kind of bonded over something you dislike, the other thing that I find really funny, and I have kind of put in the book a little bit, is like when you're with a friend and you're whinging about something, they almost will agree with whatever you say because you're their friend. But if someone else said it, like you might be like, oh, I can't believe that person's going to Bali. Like, and they're like, oh, everyone goes to Bali. Why is she going to Bali? Because you don't like that person. But then if I would be like, oh, I'm going to Bali, she's like, oh my God, Bali's amazing. You're gonna have such a great time. Like it's just, I think you bond. I think yeah, it's a different element to a friendship, I think.
Yeah, it's all sort of the context. And I think too, the idea of having to like readjust your support system, find these people that you can connect to in different ways. I think it's important what you touched on, that Charlie almost feels a little bit guilty or perhaps like terrible for having to kind of do this. Why do you think there's a guilt that can come with wanting a shift or making a shift on purpose in our lives?
I think because sometimes with a shift comes letting people down. I think if you end a relationship, you're letting somebody down. I think if you ghost somebody out of your life or just end a friendship, you're letting somebody down. I think if you're choosing yourself, sometimes people see that as selfish. So maybe society teaches us we shouldn't be happy about it. And sometimes I think if the confidence isn't there in your decision, you just second guess it. You overthink it. Is it intuition or is it just my anxiety? I think is a big one. Sometimes I'm worried about something and I'm like, is this intuition? Should I do something about this? Or am I just like overthinking it and am I just being anxious? So yeah, sometimes we just don't really know and it can affect how we feel about it, I think.
In the loss of a friendship, trying to process the overthinking of maybe why it happened, even the grief that it happened, how do you deal with that side of things, like the grieving process of loss and change?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think we was the reason we look back on something and miss it or want it back is just nostalgia. I just think maybe it felt like a simpler time. Sometimes I look back on my teenage years or even my early 20s. I was like, oh, I had no problems. Like, what do you, like, I shouldn't have had any stress at all. Like, but I might look back on this time in my life and think the same thing. You just only know so much and you're always the oldest you've ever been. So, you don't yet know what you don't know. So I think change is inevitable, but I think it's sad. There's two people in Brisbane that I still talk to from my hometown. Like there's a huge group of people I just fell out of touch with because I don't live there anymore and I haven't lived there for over 10 years. That's sad, and I remember old jobs or old colleagues or moments in my life that were just so great. And I feel a bit sad that they're not present, but that's life, right?
And it is so strange to me because I know even in my own life, like there's people who you spent so much time with, like the friendship can be so immersive and full. And then it always amazes me how quickly like friendship can just dissolve. Like it's not like you get the same kind of years of phasing out sometimes. It's like someone does just move or something just changes and friendship almost like evaporates even though there was so many years in it. I always find that such a bizarre aspect to friendship.
Yeah, I think a big part of friendship is effort. I definitely could be better at it. I'm pretty shocking at replying to messages. And I've got some friends that are just much better at it than I am, and they've really made a lot, perhaps a little bit more effort than I have in the last 10 years. But when we get together, it's kind of like no time's passed. So I think effort is the key to friendship. And I think I only just really realized that in the last few years. Almost, I think if I could go back in time to when I first moved to Sydney, I would have done a lot of things differently. I would have made more effort. I would have signed up for more things. I would have reached out to a lot of people more than just waiting for them to reach out to me, which they were probably the same. So it just kind of never went anywhere. So a lot of learnings there, I think, about how I regard friendship and what I would do differently if I could go back in time.
Yeah, are we just too busy for friendship maybe?
It's hard. It takes a lot of, I mean, I stand by it's like dating. Like you really have to be in it. I think quality over quantity, though. I think otherwise you just do have a lot of texts that are unanswered. But yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard to juggle everything. I think you just got to make time for it. And you just got to put the effort in, really.
And even being able to deal with some of the big stuff that comes up in the life of our friends, that's a huge thing. That is something that we see Charlie and Genevieve having to deal with. That you, I think in a really wonderful way, you touch on these IVF scenes that are quite intimate. There's a lot of vulnerability there. How did you begin to even approach something like that with the appropriate sensitivities, like dealing with the complexities of that? Where did you want to take the scenes, I suppose, that deal with IVF and infertility?
Yeah, the prologue. So in the prologue, we're at Charlie's wedding. It's 2 years before the book starts. We're at Charlie's wedding, and she's with Genevieve. She follows Genevieve into the bathroom because Genevieve needs to take her daily injection, her daily needle for her IVF. And that came in like a later draft. I essentially needed in the prologue to establish such a close bond between them, and I wanted to do it in a unique way. I haven't really seen that in a book before. And truthfully, like I'm a woman in my early 30s. Like I've got a lot of girlfriends. Like I feel like when we catch up for dinner, like so many times what we're talking about is fertility. We're laughing about how the women that want to get pregnant seem to struggle, and the people that don't want to get pregnant, like teenagers, seem to be the ones that get pregnant, and how unfair that is. Like the number of women I know, number of my friends who struggled to get pregnant. I've got many friends that took years to get pregnant and now have beautiful babies. And so I just feel like it's when you hit your 30s, that is a very common occurrence is infertility and struggling. I actually think it's a lot harder to get pregnant than women realize in their 20s. I think you spend like your whole teen years and your whole 20s just almost like terrified of an accident. And then you get your 30s, you're like, it's actually really hard to get pregnant, even harder when you're in your 30s. And so I really wanted to put it in. I think it bonds people, and I think it's a beautiful way to express friendship is when someone's there to support you for that. And I just also thought I'd never really seen it in a book, and I thought it was an interesting way to start a book is them supporting each other. And I do like this idea that in the prologue we're at Charlie's wedding and her husband just never makes an appearance in the prologue. Like he's not in it. I think his name appears like towards the end of the prologue, so you don't even know what his name is. Like it's not about him. Like it's her wedding and she doesn't even care. She's not even there. Like and then they get divorced, so maybe it's a bit of a sign.
Well,
So
yeah, it kind of like hints at things to come, but also I think too hints at a bit of the intention of this book, where the idea of friendship, the importance of female friendship, it maybe is more important than our romantic relationships.
yeah, I think some like friendships is like our romantic relationships. It's just so important to maintain them. I think it's cruel when friendship can be a first thing to go when you're in a relationship, which sometimes can happen. I've, been fortunate enough that that's never happened to me. I've never felt like I've lost a friend to their relationship or vice versa. But it can happen, you can get kind of swept up in it. But yeah, I think you gotta kind of treat your friends like it's a romantic relationship and make the effort and see them. And I think you get a different kind of happiness out of your friendships. And that's kind of what I mean about the pie chart. Like it's just, I don't think it's fair that a friendship is your entire happiness. And I don't think a relationship is your entire, I think there's so many different things that can bring you happiness. And it's about what's going to bring you happiness and how can you achieve it.
We're going to be the kind of friend then who shows up, who does friendship well. What do you think you would love to see people doing differently, I suppose? Having researched friendship so much, what is it that you think makes for a successful, a healthy friendship?
I think genuine care and I think asking questions and I think being invested in the other person's life. I've kind of ended friendship, not ended, just not pursued friendships. If you kind of catch up and it's a one-sided conversation, which can be really common, like they just there's no kind of questions, there's no genuine curiousness about how the other person's life is going, and that's pretty defeating, I think, when you catch up with someone like that. So that's one trait of someone that I usually don't entertain in a friendship is when it's one-sided and there's no curiosity or concern for another person's life. So I think it's about being curious and about care and concern and reliability and making time. And it doesn't need to be physical. You don't need to be in the same room together. And yeah, that's to me, that's what I look for in a friendship. I don't need to see them all the time. I don't need to talk all the time, but do need to feel that they're there. And if I needed them and I called them, we could at least communicate.
Weirdly enough, I feel like I find, I agree. Time is a really important thing in a friendship, and knowing, you've got those people that you can call when you need somebody. But I think we do end up now with so many more almost superficial kind of friendships, because you can readily have a touch point with somebody through sending that reel, through liking their post,
Yeah.
through a cheeky comment on something. It feels like you're more connected than maybe you otherwise are. Do you feel like that kind of, like, the superficial nature of friendships that we're allowed to have these days, do you think that's good, being able to keep that constant kind of presence? Or do you think it almost makes things a little bit more shallow because we're not needing that intentional face to face as much?
I think that kind of communication is fun. I think it keeps a friendship light. I also think that helps build a friendship when you don't yet have the depth. I think about friendships that I've built and sometimes just sharing hilarious things. Like maybe you're not yet at that level of depth. Like I know that seems crazy, but they're not the kind of person you're going to divulge to yet. But just over time, laughing about the same things or disliking the same things, you just become closer and then it builds to that kind of friendship. Because I think friendships do need time. I'm not certainly not the person to divulge straight away to a friendship. It just takes a little bit of time. So I think they're great. Sometimes it can be a bit hard to just keep up if you're living a busy life, but as long as you both know the other person is just they're going to reply as soon as they can and they're definitely they care and they've got concern. It's just, maybe it won't be constant communication, but they'll do their best. I think it's just about yeah, intention and expectation out of the friendship is important as well. But I think it's fun. I just sometimes it's just there to build the friendship up, maybe.
And the side you touch on of, the vulnerability aspect, I feel like in friendships we can also get the vulnerability coma or the vulnerability hangover that you might also get in the dating world. Like, it's such a good the way the two relate there, because oversharing in friendships just as much as oversharing in dating, it's also a thing.
Yeah, it is. I like to think friends of like will happily join you on some kind of wild goose chase of train of thought, more so than maybe an early dating stage would. So I think your friends, it's slightly different, but it is like dating in that, you really have to put a lot of effort and time in and you've got to be responsive and you do have to put yourself out there. Like people say, oh, I'm ready to date again, or I think I'm going to go on the apps, or I'm going to go on some dates. It's like you kind of have to think of friendship the same way. Like I'm going to like I said it maybe 6 months ago, I was like, I'm going to try and meet some new people in my area. Like I live in Western Sydney and I didn't grow up in Western Sydney. I've been living here for maybe 6 or 7 years, and any friends we have out here are friends of my partner's because he's from out here. So I kind of thought, oh, maybe I'll try and meet some new people out here in this area. So I think you just had to actively say, I'm going to try and meet new people. And it's not embarrassing. It's just life, I think.
Yeah, there's no shame in wanting connection, because we all do relate to that. And as you said earlier, there's somebody else who in your circle is likely looking for new friendship as well.
Yeah, and there might be someone who's struggling. And I think what I find interesting in a friendship is if you're talking to someone for long enough, something that seems perfect about their life, there's usually some chink in it that comes out. And I don't mean a big one, like someone whose relationship seems amazing and they only talk about amazing things. Like if you're friends with them for long enough, if you're talking to them for long enough, at some point they will divulge something that just, and it might not be a big thing, but it's just like, oh, really, this is really frustrating. And you see the double sided, and that's inevitable, I think, and a beautiful thing when you get to that point. Like, people go, oh my God, my job is amazing, or I'm having such an amazing time. You talk to them long enough, there's something they don't like. There's just nothing perfect. And I think I find that really fascinating when I've almost cracked that. Like I'm at dinner with a friend and we've known each other for so long and they'll reveal something about their relationship that maybe isn't amazing. And you go, wow, it's the first time you've ever done that. Like that's a vulnerability there, which is amazing. So that's a pretty great moment, I think, in a
Yeah.
friendship.
And more often than not, at least I know for me, it's I'm not going to connect to somebody well if they are determined to keep up that veneer. Like cracking that veneer and actually relating to them on a more kind of truthful, authentic level, I find that so much more valuable in friendship.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe they're worried like what you'll think or what you'll say. I mean, I've certainly divulged certain things to friends and their response wasn't really what I'd hoped it would be, and that was a bit of a disappointment. They weren't quite as helpful or supportive. So sometimes, yeah, you sometimes you don't really have the reaction you want. But I think just being honest, I think that's when the other person starts being honest. It's just like you can relate. And then you do just like the same things. Like I've had dinners with girlfriends where just things like fertility or relationships, or like I'm planning a wedding and how expensive weddings are and guest lists and things like that. You just start to kind of talk about that. And I think
Mm.
it's just to sometimes I have this kind of I guess approach and it can be friends or partners where it's do you need my advice or do you just need to vent? Because sometimes it's really important to know the answer to that because for a long time my partner I thought he needed my advice and sometimes and he'd and I was like actually you just need a vent and that's cool, that's okay, you don't need my advice, that's okay. So it's like I think sometimes taking that approach too when you're with friends is do they need my advice or do they just want to vent?
And the mess of it all of life clearly like fascinates you with your previous book, Perfect-ish, and now this one as well. Why is it something that you're drawn to, this almost like anti-rom-com, the kind of anti-perfect version of what life could look like?
Yeah, because my first book was about turning 30 and people I just felt like when I was in my late 20s, I started writing that when I was about 27. I just felt like women, particularly around me, were looking at 30 as if it was some kind of deadline to achieve things. Like if the clock turned and they were 30 and they were single or they were in a crap job, that it was a bad thing. And 30 is still very, very young. And so I wrote about that in my first book, and then the second one's about friendship. I think I've written manuscripts before that I never bothered to try and get published because I would start by thinking of a plot and I would write it or I would get halfway through and I just wasn't that passionate about it and I didn't care about it. And if I didn't care about it, no one else is going to care about it. And so I always start with something that I find interesting about the world, what I find interesting about women in their late 20s or their 30s, what I find interesting about society, and that's where I start. And it's perhaps a bit harder because you think of a theme and then you've got to think of a plot and a set of characters that matches that. So takes a bit longer to work it out, but that's, I guess, the process that works for me. But I find it fascinating. There are so many things about life in your 20s and 30s that are just really interesting and therefore relatable.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Undistracted. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jessica Seaborn. Some takeaways as well. If building new friendships is something you're wanting to do, yes, adult friendships can be hard, require a little bit of courage, but the vulnerability, the intention can absolutely be worth it. Make sure you share this with a friend, perhaps a new one, and rate, review it wherever you're listening. And until next time, enjoy living this undistracted life.